So we are at the end of our fourth unit of class, and that unit being logic. And the information in this video, I hope, helps you do well on your exam. And if you need to go in any more detail, or you've missed a class and need to go over things, it's all here on my class Moodle page. But by now you already know that. And we started the logic unit, and it might not be logical to even do this, is look at logic fallacies, the wrong way to think. And I want to be real clear. There are more logic fallacies in the world than these 24, but 24 is a pretty good bite-sized chunk, and a lot of them are very common. Straw man. In an argument, you create a false argument that has nothing to do with that to distract people, and that's a straw man. False cause. And hopefully in science you learned about causation and correlation and the difference of those two. But some people will attribute an outcome to a cause that has nothing to do with the argument. It's bad thinking. Appeal to emotion. If I yell, if I'm loud, if I cry, if I put more veracity into my argument emotionally, it has more weight logically. That's just not the case. The fallacy, sometimes people have a hard time expressing themselves, or they don't express it well, or they even make a mistake in how they express it. It doesn't automatically dismiss the truth behind what they're saying. Essentially, the content matters, not the packaging, if you get that. Slippery slope is a very common one, that if this happens, okay, so this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. Not necessarily the case. You kind of go to this crazy worst-case scenario with slippery slope. Ad hominem is when you attack the character. Instead of looking at the argument, you attack the individual. Tu quoque, criticism with criticism. You make a legitimate argument for somebody, well, you do the same thing. Okay, that's not taking away whatever you're doing. Personal incredulity. It's not true because I don't understand it. Oftentimes people who don't understand science argue from this, okay? People who just don't know, and they say, well, I can't understand it, therefore it can't be true. Special pleading. Special pleading is when you change things up based upon circumstances. Psychics do this all the time. So if you put a psychic on TV, a guy named James Randi offered all kinds of money for true psychic ability to be proven. They always will say, well, the people didn't believe, or the circumstances on TV. That's special pleading. A loaded question is when you put the answer into the question. And I think that's the classic parent-teenager one. So you don't want to do anything with your life. Okay, that's not really a question. That's a loaded question. Burden of proof is when people say, hey, I made a claim and it's your job to disprove the claim. Wrong. If you make a claim, it's your job to prove the claim. Ambiguity. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. Bill Clinton gave us the classic example, of trying to be ambiguous with the term sexual relations. The gambler's fallacy. Now, when you're older and you go to a gambling casino, you see this at the roulette wheel where people will wait. And for instance, you get 6 black in a row, and they say, next one has to be red. That's illogical. That's the gambler's fallacy. Bandwagon. Just because it's popular, it's good. That's not true. Appeal to authority. Just because somebody has a title doesn't make it automatically correct. And if you say, well, such and such did this, therefore it's true, that's appeal to authority. Composition division. If you take one part of something and say, well, because one part is true, it applies to everything, that's composition division. Wrong ways to think. No true Scotsman. When you appeal to the purity of something, you can't do that because this, football players don't study physics. Okay, that's illogical, and you get this kind of nonsense. Genetic. If you have siblings, I think you've been the victim of this logic fallacy. Oh, you're from this family, therefore you must be a good student. Or you're from this family, you must be a clown. Okay, that's illogical. Just because the origin of something is such, it doesn't make it true. Black or white, when you say there's 2 possibilities. If I come up to you, are you going to graduate from a 4-year college or drop out? Okay, there's several options in between there. I want to join the military. I want to go to trade school. I want to get an associate's degree. That's, okay, you get it. Begging the question. When these circular arguments go around, oftentimes you see them in the construct of religion. I don't believe your religion. Well, you should. Well, why should I? Because of the Bible. I don't believe your Bible. Well, the Bible says it's right. How do you know? Okay, and it goes around and around and around. Appeal to nature. Just because it's from nature doesn't make it good. Okay, but some people say all natural. You see these people who are spending all kinds of money on the fancy food or the organic food, and they think it's, better because it's all natural. Not necessarily the case. Um, Anecdotal. Anecdotal is when you have this is a common one with teenagers. Well, this happened to such and such, therefore it applies to everybody. That such and such might be an anomaly. It might be an outlier. It might be a freak incident. So to say everything applies because one thing applied, that's anecdotal. The Texas sharpshooters, when you cherry pick data, you see this in politics all the bloody time. As a matter of fact, 63.4% of statistics and politics are made up. I just made that up too. Okay, so Texas sharpshooter, when you cherry pick whatever data you want to make your point and ignore the rest of it. And then the middle ground, to think that there's certain things, there's a middle ground. So for example, if I were to say in class, well, the world is kind of flat and it's kind of round. There's not a middle ground there. There isn't, okay? There is right and wrong sometimes. So these are the 24 fallacies, and there are a couple videos on the Moodle page if you want to see a more entertaining version than what I just broke down. And then Occam's razor. Now, Occam's razor is a mental tool to metaphorically cut away anything extraneous or unnecessary. Now, there is a time and a place it does apply, and there's a time and a place where it doesn't apply. And this is a little bit of debate to when this is. So a real common example would be, boy, howdy, I am struggling in school. Oh, my God. Okay, how can you take Occam's razor to that? You could say, well, you're struggling in school. Why? Well, because I'm doing 4 extra activities. That might apply. So maybe if you eliminate 2 of those activities, you'll have more time for your school. If I see a crying student who's very upset, and I would try to simplify things saying, you are crying. Let's make you not cry. Okay, oftentimes there's some deep, complicated reasons for the person crying. Maybe Occam's razor doesn't apply. So Occam's razor is this notion, the simplest solution is what we seek out first and cut it away. I think a good one in class was home improvement and stuff around the house. My lawnmower doesn't work. Okay, I shouldn't dissect the thing and look for the, the spark plug and everything. Well, you check if there's gas in it first. Start with the simplest and then take it from there. Now, pragmatism is a philosophical movement, and people feel that if it's practical, it's good. If it's unpractical, you get rid of it. So these are the ultra-practical, down-to-earth type people. And similar to Occam's razor, there's a time and a place for pragmatic thought. There's a time and a place that it's not. And, what that is was a good debate we had in class. But pragmatism is this notion, practical is good, unpractical needs to be rejected. Now, these paradoxes, and there's many paradoxes, we just focused on 3, is the prisoner's dilemma, the Sorites paradox, and Buridan's donkey. Okay, now, the prisoner's dilemma is the root of something called game theory. Now, game theory is an interesting application of logic to the world, and it's these 2 prisoners, and they have a choice to either stay silent or confess, and they have different outcomes. And the root of prisoner's dilemma is sometimes completely rational people will not cooperate. And why is that? Now, that's a complicated answer, and we talked about it in class, but that's the root of game theory. That's the root of, why people cooperate, why they don't. Now, Sorites paradox is this notion that can apply to, lots of things. So, for example, the classic is, well, is 1 grain of sand a heap? Well, no, of course not. No, what about 2 grains of sand? No, of course not. So according to that logic, you'll never have a heap, but as I start adding grains of sand, I eventually will have a heap. So if I were to say, that person's bald, well, okay, why? They have 1 hair. Yeah, they're bald. They have 2 hairs. They're bald. Eventually, they're going to have enough hairs to where they're not. So it's one of these situations of the limitations of language. It's the vagueness of language, sometimes the vagueness of logic. And then Buridan's donkey, again, if you're going to use pure logic, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and a donkey needs food to live and water to live, and they're equidistant. Well, does the donkey die if they're going to use pure logic? And there's a lot of applications for Buridan's donkey. So these are thinking exercises. These are called paradoxes, and they're kind of brain melting, but a component of logic. Now, Pascal's wager, Blaise Pascal was a mathematician that said, you are a fool if you don't believe in God, based upon logic. Because of these outcomes, heaven, hell, versus nothing happening, even if there's a 0.0001% chance that God exists, you should do that. He's saying, I'm going to use logic to believe in God, but there's flaws in that. There's 9 flaws. Is believing in God sufficient for salvation? Which God is he talking about? Does any human belief matter? Is heaven necessarily better than hell? I mean, if you have your friends and loved ones in hell and you're knowing that through all time, is heaven that great? Can one make themselves believe? Is it genuine? Is a greedy decision valid? I'm just covering my backside. Does that work? Can we guess God's criterion for salvation? Is the probability that God exists greater than 0? And how about this one? God is just. That God says, hey, we're flawed, and he's going to accept us for our flaws and not get rid of us because of these flaws. And then inductive versus deductive reasoning. Now in class we did a Quarto game where you had to use deductive reasoning. You had 8 pieces, your opponent had 8 pieces, you have X amount of outcomes, and you narrow it down to one move. Inductive reasoning is like a case study. So if I take one individual and apply it to a bigger thing, that's inductive. You're going the other way. Okay, so 2 different types of thinking. One, you're narrowing it down to one, and the other, you're taking one example and you're extrapolating other things from that. 2 different ways of thinking. And then premises and conclusion. Now, a premise is the proposition used as evidence. The conclusion is the result. Now, this is real simple. Okay, we can see rocks. We can touch rocks. Therefore, rocks exist. Okay, that's simple. Now, sometimes people have false premises or illogical premises or logic fallacies. But again, this is the root of logic. You have to have a premise. It's based on evidence, and if I put them together, I will come to a logical conclusion. Now, arguments are similar to this. You better have your premises and conclusions, your arguments. An argument is an assertion of a conclusion based on these premises. It's not just a contradiction. Anybody can do that. Little kids do that. They just go, no, 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 no. Okay, that's not really an argument. And again, avoid using the aforementioned logic fallacies. In particular, appeal to emotion. If I'm going to talk louder and faster, I win. I'm going to create a straw man. I'm going to do this slippery slope. So an argument is I'm going to call it an art form, and to do it well. And hopefully you can get to the point to reductio ad absurdum. If you are good enough at this, you can reduce your opponent's premises and conclusions to absurdity. And that's kind of like mental wrestling, intellectual wrestling. And syllogisms are very similar to mathematics by Aristotle, where symbols have a meaning, okay, similar to algebra, okay, like in math class, the delta means change when sigma, that kind of thing. So you can take things and break them down syllogistically into mathematical things. And here's where it doesn't work. Penguins are black and white. Some old TV shows are black and white. Therefore, some penguins are old TV shows. Okay, that's illogical. So syllogism similar to math. And as we wrap up here, logic is a science that deals with the principles and criteria of validity of inference and demonstration. It's the science of formal principles of reasoning. And I think when you get out there, you're going to see that this is a world full of illogical people, from the hallways in the school to the news media and certainly the internet. And I hope you can exit this unit being somebody who counters this, because let's face it, there's a lot of illogical people out there. And I think you've already seen that. So the 5th and final unit of class that we're going to be learning about is metaphysics. Now, metaphysics are the deep, heavy questions of God and love and death and the big, heavy stuff. And I'm glad we're doing that at the end now that we know each other. So I wish you all the best of luck on your exam, and thank you for watching.